Today we are revisiting my State 4130 all-road gravel bike to talk through its recent transformation as my monster all-road gravel bike. And yes, I am sick. The 4130 is an all-around budget-friendly classic that many gravel enthusiasts have seen before. However, after beating it up for several years, mine started breaking spokes and crunching gears. So I took the plunge and tastefully upgraded it to stand up to the all-road namesake. Was it worth it to drop $1,300 on a $900 bike? Let's find out. So to start off, I said this is my monster gravel bike, and luckily the 4130 has some pretty impressive tire clearance, and I wanted to find the upper limit of that while maximizing rolling efficiency. That is also where I probably voided my warranty. I decided to fit a pair of 700C Pirelli Cinturato M tires in 50mm width, and this ended up rubbing the chainstay and buzzing the front fork crown, so I had to make some adjustments. I grinded down the fork crown because there was extra material that came down and buzzed the tire. I didn't end up affecting the fork stanchions at all though. The rear tire had to get switched out for a 45mm Cinturato H with a bit less chunky tread pattern. Now for me, I like to take my gravel bike on light duty single track quite often, and sometimes use it for mountain bike trail systems that are pretty tame and low elevation. So I had the tire situation covered with the Cinturatos, and I got the tan wall look going as well, but those stock wheels were not holding up to bump jumping routes and dropping off curbs. I decided to stick with the 700C wheels, but wanted a more solid wheel set, so I opted for the Shimano Tiagra G540 wheel set, which ran me about $325. They had through axles, decent engagement, and a solid rim width to fit those wider Pirelli tires. Oh, and I could set this bike up tubeless finally, since my older generation of the 4130 does not come with tubeless ready wheels. For the drivetrain, I decided to go back to basics and try out the Microshift Sword group set. I kept going back and forth about whether I wanted to get a SRAM Rival or Apex group set so I could get the hydraulic brakes and whatnot, but instead I got the 10-speed version of the Sword group set for a more robust chain, and the 11 to 48 tooth range paired with the 42 tooth chainring gave me a little bit more low gear capability compared to the stock setup. I hated the full or half click feature of the original drivetrain and felt like it was way too easy to shift into a harder gear while going through bumpy terrain if you have your fingers hovering over the rear brake lever. The Microshift Sword hoods have separate shifting paddles and don't interfere with the braking levers, so it was a win-win for me, and the drivetrain came in at under $400 with cranks. The Sword group set is a mechanical braking hood design, so I had to figure out which mechanical brakes I wanted to buy since the stock ones were a single-sided design that left so much to be desired in the braking performance department. I went with the TRP Spire brakes in chrome, which look great and have a dual-sided action, so the braking feel is a bit better, but ultimately the rear brake feel is still spongy feeling with how much the cable stretches under heavy braking. It really makes it hard to feel the traction when the modulation and feedback of the rear brake remains vague. What really spooks me though is the front tire buzz I now get on my shoes when cornering tightly. With the skinnier stock tires, I did not have any foot clearance issues, but now I get some decent toe overlap. For reference, this is a size medium frame, and I am 5'11" with a size 10.5 shoe for my clipped shoes. Honestly, once I wear through this Cinturato M tire up front, I'll probably size down to the 45mm Cinturato H like I have in the back to avoid this toe overlap because it really hinders my confidence in slower speed technical terrain. Not to mention, I'm just not that comfortable being clipped in. I've enjoyed the Sword group set so far and find the hood position very comfortable. You know, the stock State group set hoods, they kind of have a bit of a bump underneath your palms, which can get a bit irritating over time. So these Microshift Sword hoods feel really nice. I also appreciate the solid feedback of the shifter paddles, and the derailleur is noticeably less finicky to set up since the thicker chain and fewer gears make it easier to find a good cable tension. The clutch on the Sword is pretty good, but the 4130 doesn't have anything for chainstay protection except a clear piece of tape, so that's really where the noise can come from. However, I don't find it to be distractingly noisy even going through rooty sections at speed. One thing I should note is that the latest generation of the 4130 has internal cable routing, which makes for a high-end look, but quite frankly, I'm glad I have the external routed one. That goes into my whole idea with this bike because it's the bike I take out of the garage and just go for a ride from my house. I don't want there to be any mechanical issues that I don't feel comfortable solving or reluctant to do because it's just flat out annoying. That was a major reason I decided to stick with the mechanical disc brakes, even though I knew I wouldn't be impressed with them. Having everything externally routed means I don't mind working on any part of the bike, which is the best step to make sure the bike is always ready to go. Now for the cockpit setup, I decided to buy some wide aluminum Ritchie handlebars, but immediately I could feel that they were too wide and gave me a tennis elbow sort of pain on my left elbow before I even wrapped the handlebars. So I swapped those out for a cheap Zip Explorer aluminum bar that might actually be slightly narrower than the stock bars. These felt great, and I feel like a wide bar on a gravel bike doesn't really help me because I like to ride in the drops on single track. Wider bars in the drops just make you way too front heavy, I think, for riding single track. I also had to get the extra thick lizard skin bar tape, which is my go-to for my drop bar bikes. Lastly, I've got my Garmin Edge MTB on an out front K-edge mount, which puts the computer in a great spot, and I think it looks really clean. I did buy 2 chrome steel water bottle cages, which were cheap and matched the look I was going for, but I'll admit this style of cage is not very secure, and I've dropped the bottle a handful of times when trying to ride mountain bike trails, so I might get a more basic plastic one that obviously holds the bottles better. So, now that we've gone through all my upgrades, would I say it was worth it? Well, of course it was. And the cherry on top was that I bought my girlfriend a new State 4130 frame to fit her. I took all the functioning stock parts off of mine, bought a new chain, and fitted an old mountain bike wheel to hers, and bada bing bada boom, now we each have our own gravel bike to ride together. So really, for $1,800, I revamped my bike and got my girlfriend a frame that I rebuilt for her, and it fits her, which I think is a great value. So let me know if you have any questions about my gravel bike rebuild down in the comments, and remember, stay venturing, my friend.